On this week's program, the Dungeoneer digs deep into the white box of stupidity. Mr. Flamboyant is objectively incorrect about the most incorrect take on Twitter. Rump DM is out there showing his rump again about one-to-one time. And the Koala Quill seems to think it takes money to have discipline and organization. That's right, folks. We are coming in hot with the low-temperature IQs this week on intelligence as a dump stat. I'm Daniel, and welcome all to Driving and Dragons. Friends, patrons, members, lend me your ear. Next week there shall be a featured special edition of Intelligence as a Dump Stat that will be posted early for members and patrons over on Patreon. What could be so stupid that it gets its own special episode? That's right, it's me. I have fallen on the sword, taken one for the team, and delved into Jeffro Johnson's How to Win at D&D, so you don't have to. Well, to call it a book is giving it a bit too much credit. So the pamphlet that built the bridge under which the BroSR trolls will be reviewed and critiqued here on the channel. So don't miss it, and sign up on Patreon or as a YouTube member to get it early. This week will also feature the first of the neutral alignments in the alignment series and a return to the You're Doing It Wrong, my series on GM advice, where we will touch on critical failures. Like, share, subscribe, and hype the video while you're here, and consider leaving a super thanks. Let's get on with the show. Kicking things off is Dungeoneer, who just barely missed the list last week thanks to WotC and their incredibly idiotic maelstrom of dumb. It was dice fudging last week that didn't clear the bar, but this week we get the secret they don't want you to know is that Chainmail is required material for every edition of D&D. Simply put, no it isn't. It wasn't even required for the lone edition of Basic in which it was recommended, simply as a way for Gary Gygax to sell more of his company's product. Now, Chainmail can be useful in later editions of D&D, and particularly in the early, largely complete incomplete editions of Basic, but it's in no way required. This is no more the secret they don't want you to know than those pills in your spam folder featuring the African tribal gentleman contain secrets the adult film industry doesn't want you to know. I'll bet that Dungeoneer thinks that Frito Chili Pie requires an ice-cold Pepsi because Pepsi-owned Frito-Lays told him so on the optional recipe card that came with his corn chips. Never one to be outdone in the proudly proclaiming demonstrably false statements category, RDubs, Mr. Flamboyant himself, makes his return. RDubs is one of the more obnoxious BroSR leg humpers that falls squarely into the B-dubs camp. Some bros are jovial, all in good fun, character-playing personalities on X. Some are just outright jackwagons with unearned and inflated airs of superiority and all the charisma of a toothless chain smoker in a filthy studio apartment in Canada. RDubs falls into that latter category. What did he say to land here? Well, Classic D&D posted pictures of the second edition rulebook and said that it is indeed AD&D. Says so right on the cover. RDubs comes back with probably the most objectively incorrect take on Twitter ever. Okay, so you clowns swear up and down that what is essentially an ad for another TSR product is absolute gospel requirement for said product to be used, but when the original publisher releases an updated version that is based so heavily on the same rules that it is backwards compatible in almost every way, that's not actually Dungeons and Dragons. Based on what? Feels? Your own outrageous ego? Because it sure ain't anything remotely resembling logic. RDubs is an ass. He presents every point he makes in the single most ass way possible. And in this case, he can't even get the platform right. It isn't objectively wrong, it's objectively correct. And it wasn't on Twitter, it was on X. Following in the obnoxious, ego-driven BroSR vein of idiocy, we find IAADS regular Rump DM. He is, of course, engaged in his monthly war with somebody over one-to-one timekeeping. It's kind of like his period or something. Women get emotional and want chocolate. Rump shows his ass and cries about timekeeping. He was responding to a comment that he paraphrased as, "Rump, there are ways to track time and make these sort of things meaningful without using one-to-one." That is a very accurate statement. In fact, there are many arguments for the case that one-to-one is one of the least efficient and flexible timekeeping methods, and may not even be the superior choice for West March's style play with multiple parties. But Rump read How to Win at D&D, so he must push the word of his lord and master if he wants to get his place on that spaceship that's hiding behind the comet when it comes by. How does it work in practice? In practice, you just never get a griffin until you can do the appropriate time lapse, and maybe you don't get one at all. Ooh. Yeah, dummy, that's right. But it's a cooperative game. This is where players working together comes into play. I need 6 months to train my griffin. The wizard decides to dive into the library for new spells. The thief sets up a criminal network that feeds the party information. The fighting man agrees to train the town guards on advanced techniques and earns favor in the local governor. Things like that. Swear to God and Sonny Jesus, guys. The BroSR blowhards love to act like everything is so simple until there is a simple solution to their idiotic hypotheticals, and then it's, oh my God, they'll never line up, it'll never work. We finish out this week outside of the TTRPG world with the tangentially related topic of writing. This piece of nincompoopery came from the author's account, but the principle that they are getting so wrong also applies to game masters writing campaigns and game designers making games too, so we'll go with it. How to be a successful writer according to people with money. Create a sacred writing space equals buy a house big enough to have spare rooms. Write at the same time every day equals have control over your schedule. Minimize distractions equals stop having emergencies. These are what we call excuses of chronic failures. This is bullshit masturbatory victimhood complex and lack of accountability in full swing. And what's hilarious is how it is so much like Rump's one-to-one timing arguments, where suddenly, all of a sudden, a tiny little bit of cooperation is suddenly a nigh impossible task. Create a sacred writing space. That's free. You don't need a special office or an extra room. It can be as simple as a chair under your favorite tree or a corner of your room that is metaphorically where you screen out the world. Write at the same time every day. Control of your schedule? Are we talking to teenagers here? Are we not working adult jobs with regular schedules? Even if you're like a swing shifter, that piece of advice doesn't have to be taken literally. It means keep a regular writing schedule. Treat it like a job since you're trying to be successful at it commercially. It's also free. Minimize distractions. Yeah, this ain't got nothing to do with emergencies, at least not real ones. You see, what's also free is not miscategorizing your tasks. An unsuccessful, a trait, almost universal trait of unsuccessful people is that they treat optional tasks as vital and chronically misuse terms like urgent or emergency. They have things that become emergencies because they procrastinate. They treat something that is vital but doesn't have to be done right now as unnecessary, and they can do it later until it becomes urgent and thus an emergency. They also waste time on things that they got to do them right now, but they don't really matter, which creates an emergency out of something that absolutely isn't. And you'll notice a pattern here. The only way these things become, according to people with money, are when you view them entirely through a lens that doesn't see any kind of personal responsibility or agency. So here you go. You want to finish that game you've been designing for 10 years? Block time to work on it. When you are in that block, Only focus on the work and physically separate yourself from the outside world so that your brain learns, when I'm here, it is time for me to work on my game. It really is that easy. That's all I got. I guess I'm responsible for my own headache powder this week. I'll see you guys next time.